Hey, what is going on, everyone? It is David Palmer, the Leo King, here on HighVibe.tv, and I have our own HighVibe.tv Apollodite in the house here at the HighVibe TV studios to talk astrology, especially some real deep astrology, because he is another double Leo. He's been an awesome astrologer that I've known for 3.5 years. He's also not only just a health astrologer, but I don't know, man. I'm going to have you take it away. You're another double Leo. How are you doing? And I want everybody to know, what is the astrology that you love so much?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on this wonderful show in this wonderful studio. To be honest, I just know it as astrology. I never really thought, because health astrology is a very specific form of it. But to be honest, it's always just been astrology to me. Sort of how, I don't know, learning is just learning no matter what it is. And so
That's true.
And with astrology, it's never ending. And so I think that above all else, astrology is this never ending understanding of things. And so it's been quite a wild ride as an astrologer, and how it's improved my life for sure.
Yeah, I mean, astrology is really just what it is in general, I guess you could say. Of course, I guess I've been to too many astrology conferences, where it's like you do mundane astrology, like horoscopes, and you are a horoscope astrologer.
I am.
A lot of people, there's not a lot of horoscope astrologers out there.
There isn't. There really isn't. And it's been interesting because at this point now I've been doing it for 3.5 years, 4 years now, and it doesn't even really feel like, labor. It just sort of feels like my daily routine now. And,
Right.
and it's sort of like, oh, got to do my daily horoscope. But it's always been so interesting watching throughout the days, weeks, months, years, how things play out individually and the world, and sometimes it can be very overwhelming too, especially as because it's like a computer, no matter how beautiful and how strong, can only handle so much information, and we too can only handle so much. And if astrology is never ending, because I don't think any of the planets are just going to blow up any time soon, but the planets are always in motion, and life is always in motion too. And so I think it's a matter of really being in the moment, and I think that's what trips a lot of astrologers out. And a lot of times people try too hard to even predict the future, which can be it can be iffy depending on where they're currently at. Because if you're trying to, for example, if you're trying to believe in a terrible future, because astrology, it's so interesting watching how life plays out with astrology, and how world events can be kind of, you can see the mirroring in it, and so it's so interesting trying to figure out what's real and what's true. And it's funny because you've been to so many astrology conferences, I haven't been to any, and so I feel you're the experienced one, and I'm like the little virgin, and just
No, it's not like that at all. If anything, you haven't been tainted by the astrology conferences and the. It reminds me of kind of how the government, right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm not about the government, but like once you get in the government, it can kind of taint you forever.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, but actually, no,
it's not that bad.
good.
Yeah.
So it's like, but then I kind of revolted and then got like,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy. But I think what's great about you is, I mean, we all have our unique diversity in astrology. And what I think makes you so powerful is not only that you do horoscope astrology, you love studying astrology itself too, the history of it. You love ancient astrology. You love looking at medieval astrology. You love Greek. We're going to talk about some of that today.
Oh, yes.
But you also have that health element to it, where that's just something, of course, I think any good astrologer, at least, it knows the basics with the health, right? Like we understand that the planets all represent parts of the body.
The universal man, or whatever, yeah.
But there's a lot more to it. And I think the last health astrologer I actually did an interview with, I know her name. She's on my interviews. Her name, Rebecca Gordon. That was the last health astrology interview I did with, and that's what she just purely does. She's been on like the doctors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you do it every day.
Yeah, I do. It's funny, I don't even think about it at this point. When getting balance at first, getting into the swing of things, I think with any skill set or routine is always, the first step. But once you get into it, it just becomes kind of second nature. As my understanding has evolved. I sort of, the way I would do like I suppose my note taking for my dailies, it's improved. Before I would really, really think it out. And I still think it out. I just sort of kind of do bullet points because I don't need to dwell or like logically rationalize it. It just sort of comes to me. And astrology is interesting because it's technically a science, because it's an interpretation of information.
Right.
We could say objective information. You were born at a specific time, specific place, specific sun, moon, rising, and all that. And it's been interesting to see how the diversity of astrology and birth charts and how it plays out health-wise, because everyone has a brain, skin, bones,
Right.
muscles, and so all the anatomy is the same. Gravity affects everyone the same way, and so it's always been interesting. Life in general, just trying to figure out what is reality, what is it, what is truth, what is real, and then astrology comes into the fray at some point, and now there's like this almost like a cheat sheet, or it's like this, like, here's this little, there's something here. It's like this little it's a red pill train from like the Matrix, and it's like, oh, well, I can't go back now. You can't. Even when people are like, oh, I'm sun, whatever, da 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 da. It's like, oh my God.
The co-star astrology plague.
Yeah, I know, really. Oh my God.
I think it's a plague.
It is. It's
I want to know your
infection.
opinion about that, because the reason why I think it's a plague is because it's teaching astrology the incorrect way.
Yeah, it's so basic, and I don't want to seem mundane, because to be honest, I kind of realize that I want my horoscopes to be practical, simple, keep it simple, especially for the general, because it's one thing if I'm working one-on-one with someone, because I can get really, we can really talk and, flush things out. But in a general horoscope, it can be so, iffy, and let alone with like sun sign, romantic astrology, not even talking about moon sign, not even talk about Venus or anything like that. And so I think that it's so interesting how, and you know this, but how astrology way back when it first started, it was reserved for kings and probably queens and whatnot, and high priests, and there was no calculators back in the day. You had to do all of that math out by hand. You had to figure out where the stars were, the latitude, longitude. I'm so glad for all these beautiful, wonderful new programs that do all the math for us. Math was never my strong suit, but that's
why I love Porphyry. I mean, like, he was such an amazing astrologer, and started really taking the house systems, and in my opinion, his house system is one of my
Porphyry,
favorite.
he's one that I use. Yeah. I like his the best.
It's just, it's simple. It works correctly. It makes sense.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different house systems. I mean, you go in any program now, and it's like,
oh my God, literally, I don't even know what some of them are.
I mean, I've been bored enough in the amount of time I've been doing this where I've looked up every system.
I bet you have.
Mathematical reason why that system's there. And, to me, equal is something that I think is great. Porphyry, and I love Placidus. I like Placidus too. I'm a big Placidus astrologer.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, now that it's gone so rare, now everyone and their mother knows, at the very least, what their sun sign is. They probably don't know what their moon sign is, but it's so interesting to see how people, I've seen, oh my God, my local newspaper. I want to knock on the door of whoever's the sun sign horoscope writer and I'm like, what is this crap? What is this? It's just like there's no rhyme or reason. And to be fair, there's good advice regardless of sun, moon, rising sign. But I think that it's just respectful. And to be fair, if people don't know better, they can't do better. And I think astrology is, we both understand, it's probably one of the most misunderstood, misused tools, because it is a tool. It's a tool. It's a study. We could probably call it one of the most original sciences, because astrology was the original astronomy before people got whiny and crying about the metaphysical and whatnot, and it's so silly. And even like Pluto's no longer a planet and whatnot. It's so, and it's so, I don't at the end of the day, you kind of have to roll your eyes and laugh, because that's all you can do. And especially because if people are, unknowingly perpetuating silly myths and trites and whatnot, it's annoying.
Well, and I think that you bring up a good point, especially about like, you have to learn to laugh and roll your eyes at it and just do it yourself and go your own way.
Yeah.
Which honestly, since we both became friends and started to work together 3.5 years ago with Future Life, the idea of you doing a horoscope daily horoscope has never been done.
Never been done. Never been. Sometimes I forget that. Sometimes I forget that, this has never been done. The studio is incredible, by the way, and you should be very proud of everything that you've accomplished. And for those who don't know, David is one of the most generous souls I've ever met.
Oh, you don't have to do that.
Well, I'm doing it anyway. And I think that because you've invested so much of yourself into something, and anyone who does that into anything, I have respect for. But you've literally created a platform and a legacy. You're the only person who has their own app and their own network, and we're all here together. At the very least, it feels like the best. I feel
like it's all about everybody who watches and all of us. And they say we're all coming together, however, whatever form we are, whether it's a viewer, whether it's you're doing dailies, anybody on the app, or people that work here in the app that aren't. There's people who work that aren't even talent on the app, although I like to do that for people, to give them their voice, right?
Right, yeah.
But I think that's what it's about, is that the highest vibe we could do is all come together and and be. I think high vibe is just about being yourself.
I was going to say, it's about us as individuals coming together. It's not we're all relying on each other like we're going to fall apart if someone's not there. We're all very wonderful, capable individuals. And of course, we're all there for each other too. We all need a little pick-me-up every once in a while, I'm sure. But it's so wonderful to just be here with everyone and to really share myself with people who understand and respect it and they're interested in what I have to say and not, iffy or, confused about it. And of course, and I'm sure when you meet people on the street, if they don't know who you are, you're like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a teacher.
I want to ask you, so what do you say? Because that's the hardest thing to ever tell anybody. It really is.
It's like, because above all else, I do identify above even astrology. I am a teacher, I'd say, to the core, and words can really only do so much. You really do have to live by example, I suppose you could say. But when people, ask me what I do, I'm like, I tell them I'm a health teacher. I have this online school class thing. It's great. I love it. I work with really wonderful people. Oh, where are you flying? I'm going to LA. Oh, what are you going to do? I'm meeting up with my friends. We're going to have a really good time. We're going to work together. Oh, what do you do? We're teachers. Oh, what do you teach? Health, wellness. Being nice to each other. It's kind of awkward, but at the same time, you kind of have to give them like a pageant queen answer, like, oh, da 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 da. Right. But because it's better to save yourself a little bit of that cortisol stress than trying to explain something to someone that's not going to get it, or they're going to judge you, or they're going to be like, is that financially dependable or whatever? And yes, it is. And you can make truthfully anything financially dependable if you trust yourself, and if you make not just the strict effort. It's really dedication, because dedication implies time, not necessarily effort. But of course, you do want to show up, and so, and it's funny because doing this, there are, some, tough moments, but overall, this is such I can't imagine any other career. And it's and having the freedom to be who I am and do what I want, and especially to do it with people who I love and cherish and respect, and it's all mutual. And so I think that this is, this is a wonderful time to be on Earth. It's
awesome.
It's the best of times, it's the worst of times, as they say, and I swear that's always true.
It's always true.
During caveman times, they were like, me want go-kart, and then someone put a cart on a horse or whatever, and a wheel,
What I think though is this is the best of times, with some of the there's harder times, but I think if people look through the smoke screen, it's the best time of all time. We were predicting that as astrologers for decades, and that this period in time would be the best of times. There's just this really dark smoke screen. A lot of it's the media, because that actually is where people get all the info. And so a lot of it is like, Michael Luton, who's one of my greatest mentors and my favorite astrologer of all time. I did an interview with him at UAC 2018, and he said that astrologers, they have their whole body like against the door from this kind of weird dark force that's trying to come in and to keep that out and keep people informed of what's going on and how to stay in their truth and their light. But when somebody asks you what you do, your answer was very funny to me because it really is, and I don't care how long you do it. It's not, it's like, even when I own it in every way I can, but like
Right.
there's something about when it's like you're on a public transit, you're just at a grocery store, you're at a party and with people you don't know, or you're dating somebody, you're gonna meet their parents or their friends, or like it's just like one of those like, it's like I'm an astrologer, but then it's like I always feel like I don't want to be just labeled as just an astrologer.
Exactly.
Because it's been given such a bad
misinterpretation.
Or such a small, like, oh, you do horoscopes. Or, oh, you tell me. Then it usually turns to tell me what's happening to me or whatever.
Yes, every single time. It gets exhausting. It really does. Or I'm this sun sign and my lover's this sun sign. Are we going to break up? Sometimes I want to be a little playful and be like, yes, you are. You're going to break up and you're never going to find love again. But I don't actually do that, of course. But it can be.
I'm sure you do a little sometimes.
Well, maybe sometimes.
We're both double Leos. We have no problem being the king and sitting around and be like, well, this will make me laugh.
Well, yeah, that's true. I certainly do enjoy. I don't mind stirring the pot a little. I think we all enjoy a little bit if you enjoy watching like any form of reality television, even like America's Got Talent, you enjoy the drama, someone's got to win that competition and it's only going to be one person. So, you're rooting for someone, right? And so I think that it's perfectly all right to enjoy life. And I think that's the Leo essence. And everyone is all 12 sun signs and all 10 planets, just in different ratio. So regardless of sun, moon, rising, whatever, I think the essence of Leo is it's the sun. It's that consciousness. We
all have that.
Yeah. It's the heart. It's the continuously, the muscle that never stops pumping blood until you kick the bucket and then your heart's no longer pumping.
So I have a couple questions for you to kind of lead in from that.
Sure.
In history, is there anybody or currently in your life that like, how did you get into astrology and what really got you more into the health place?
Excellent question. So to be honest, I'm not entirely sure when the word astrology came into experience, probably wafted in during childhood or something. But I really started the journey proper, I would say, right after I started college, which was 2013. And I remember being in the common room of my dormitory where I was hanging out with a bunch of people, and we were all talking about sun signs, birth signs, compatibility even between sun signs. And I had found a website that compared sun signs with each other. And it was very in depth. It was surprisingly in depth. It was about it was just based on sun sign alone, but the way that it really went into how I was a Leo and my friend was a Scorpio, and how we had our interactions with each other. And then I would say by sophomore year, things started to develop more and more. And then by, I think it was junior year, that's when I really started looking into it more and more. I had a chart reading actually by Deborah Silverman.
Actually. Oh, I love Deborah.
Yeah, and a magical moment. So she was actually doing like a free live stream one day, and she randomly picked 3 people, and I was the first one.
No way.
No way. And that's when I first looked at my chart. And that's when I learned out that I was a moon in Pisces. And for those that don't know, I'm a double Leo, Venus, first house sun with my moon in Saturn, 8th house, 9th house, Pisces, depending on what house system you use.
Mercury and Virgo.
Mercury and Virgo, square Jupiter and Sag, exactly 5 degrees each. I feel like I'm flaunting my resume. But then and then around that time, I had stumbled across you. And that's when then senior year came around, which was 2016 into 17. And that's when you came out with Leo King Elite. And that's the astrology school that David has. And by graduation, instead of figuring out what grad school or whatever I wanted to go to, I figured out how do I make this astrology thing work, because and I wish I could give like the full details of like, oh, I learned this and that and da 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 da. But it really, over the course of those 4 years, as I was learning academia about exercise science, which is what I got my bachelor's in, I was also learning about metaphysics and astrology and I guess the occult. Or it's funny because the word occult means hidden or secret, and it's funny because you can never trying to make something secret's kind of difficult, because the more you talk about something, the bigger it gets. And you were kind of talking about the truth and how, the truth always finds a way of coming out. There's multiple different mouthpieces. And so I think that, and what astrology taught me is helping me as an individual find my own preferences in life. And we all have preferences, and especially in general, like no one wants to be, whipped and flogged and disrespected. And so we all like love, we all like knowing joy and our own sense of freedom and expansion. And so I think that astrology, especially when it comes to the health side of things, because as I stated, so actually before I went to college, in high school, I went to a tech school, and my shop, we call them, was health careers. And we actually got my CNA, my certified nursing assistant, which are the, usually the girls in nursing homes who take care of the elderly. And that was a whole adventure in itself. It really helped me learn compassion, and really helped me learn, what I suppose the death process a little bit was about, which, you can go on about that too. But when it comes to the health aspect of astrology, because you have to compare your own chart first. You have to, it's hard to relate to other people if you don't know what you're doing with yourself. And looking into the health aspect of it, because, being in health care as I wanted to make a difference, wanted to heal the world and, do my part. But it's very draining in the healthcare world. It's so draining. And I know I really didn't want to do what everyone else was doing, because I could tell it wasn't working.
Well, and especially like what we've seen in this last year and a half. I mean, I feel terrible. Like what they call them, frontline workers, right?
Oh yeah. Oh
because,
my God.
But I just feel like it's been all people in healthcare, because I feel like even the people who aren't like less necessarily on the front line, that are supporting the front line in healthcare, and even people that are not at the hospitals or at the care facilities or at the admin part, the paramedics and the people who support the paramedics, and it just that whole industry, it's got so much. I don't even know it. I never, after high school, I did go into the military, but I never did go to school, or I never went to college, or I never went to any kind of like corporate or government thing after the military. So but I just, from my own eyes, was just like, oh wow, like that's just, I don't know.
One thing I learned in college, actually, that I learned from my doctorate college professor, was that when it comes to treating high blood pressure, 4 out of 5 doctors will give a pill as opposed to recommending exercise. And if I could summarize my degree in one sentence, is exercise is good for you, and it can really make a difference. And you don't need to be a triathlete. Hell, you don't even need to necessarily even strictly go to a gym. You could do squats at home. I mean, nowadays they have yoga apps. They have, they have and then people buy them and they're like, I don't want.
They have beds that massage you now. Like, I almost feel like you could just keep going like this and at least do something. They even like shockers for your abs now. I'm not saying to do that, but like, you're right though. And especially because Leo rules the sun and the heart. Like, there's a core that needs to keep self-generating itself. Yeah. And it's almost like I forgot what's that line, you would know it, like something in stillness
sedentary?
Or it's like, or something in motion stays in motion.
Oh, perpetuating momentum. I
don't know. I love your Mercury Virgo's coming down. My Mercury and Leo's like, I don't know, it's just something that's fucking maybe Mercury is that fall, like if it what?
One of Newton's.
Oh no, I just am from a pill commercial where it's like, things that people who stay in motion. Take this pill to get back into motion,
Yeah, and even pharmaceuticals. It's like, here, you feel like crap, have a drug, have a pill. Booze commercials, not to shame booze or anyone who drinks, but, it's ethanol. It's drinking too much of it will kill you. And so...
Well, that's actually what the stat just came out, that male and female, people in their 20s are dying of liver failure. I know.
Yeah, especially in college. And I used to, I was in college too. I had my fun freshman phase, and yeah, there is kind of a culture, and it's funny because it almost seems, because rebellion implies stress. No one rebels on a good day. I'm feeling, but
Well, and think Algol, which rules alcohol, which where it came from, the star Algol at 26 of Taurus, is actually what rules alcohol. And what's interesting about it is the North Node Rahu's on its way towards Algol. We have had Lilith that's been hanging out here in Taurus over Algol. Mm-hmm. The eclipses have been getting closer to Algol.
Mm-hmm. Has it been at, because it's a late star in Taurus, right?
Yeah, correct.
I was going to say, because Uranus hasn't been fiddling around with it yet.
Not yet, but that's...
Yeah.
And also, it's one of those things where Algol, Algol, which is where alcohol comes from.
Interesting. I never knew that.
Yep. And you would think it would actually come from a Taurus thing, like in many ways, like, I want to have that indigestion. And it also is, a natural thing that then...
It is, yeah.
Right?
It's just, and it's moderation, and people are, and it's the numbing. I don't want to feel this way, and I'm numbing it. And of course it's logical, but it's a lot of medicine nowadays is let's cover up the signs and symptoms as opposed to treating the origin. It's like a weed. You got to pull the whole root out unless you want the weed to come back. And many people, they keep covering. It's like they keep.
Well, it's the Neptune Pisces thing, especially if you think about 2011. That's when we start seeing pill commercials go crazy.
Really? It's funny. I don't watch much TV these days and I don't personally recommend it. That's just me.
Well, maybe it's a generational thing, right? The Pluto Libra in me that was around in 80.
Well, DVR and fast forward through the commercials. Those commercials got nothing good for you. I was watching TV in the hotel, and I'm like, McDonald's came on. I'm like, I haven't had McDonald's in a year. I'm like, maybe I'll give it a try again. And I'm like, I caught you, because they get you with the bright flashing lights and the kids and the Happy Meals. And to be fair, if someone's selling a product, of course, it's fair to put an advertisement out there. But they try to get you in with the pretty colors and the lights, and it's like, don't you? Have you seen those weird Happy Meal commercials? It's like they got so weird. Like the box, everyone knows like the McDonald's box. It's got like eyes and teeth, and it's like not even. Ugh. So weird. So weird.
I can't say that I've seen.
It's weird.
The Happy Meal commercial lately.
I don't know why.
I grew up with the Moon Man that was singing for Big Macs, for McDonald's, and Ronald McDonald in commercials at McDonald's.
I haven't seen him in forever. Is he
well, clowns have died basically. Like with the circus.
When those killer clowns? When were they out? Like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, and then
maybe even earlier. Yeah.
And I remember even in Joe Dirt, it was like when he meets his parents, his real parents, and they live in the trailer park, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's like, we got a clown for you, and they got all those clowns. It's like, have a clown, get rid of your frown. It was like creepy. And it really is connected to, like, clowns kind of came around the beginning of the 1900s.
Yeah.
Big time in America with the circus and Barnum and Bailey's and going across. Because if you think about entrepreneurship down in those times during the Industrial Revolution, it was like, they had the World's Fair, but then there was like, how can we like bring the World's Fair in kind of like a way to cities? And we have train tracks now, and then they paint everything to look all cool, and then they were like, let's just get every weird show that we can. And actually it goes back to the last time Neptune was in Pisces, when you start seeing psychics and astrologers and like even tarot come and resurge, actually, we have seen now. But then it got really, the religion back then was so strong that it was like, it was witch trials on those people, again, in their own way of just calling them as crazy.
Yeah.
And then it became, you went to the circus basically to go do a tarot reading, and it was a circus act.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But I think that the clown thing is something that is weird, that at the beginning of this millennium, and especially at the beginning of this last, decade, just died out, because it's almost like, at least we were able to face real shit back then. And
we
the
had no choice.
clowns represented the clowns that were clowns.
Yeah.
Now we're all clowns. So we're wearing the suits.
Yeah. And no one feels like laughing even per se.
Yeah.
Because people are so, there's that, I remember even, I think we were talking about this the other night here in the studio, but there was actually a Golden Girls episode where this little girl, and that was during like the Cold War-ish time, or a little bit after even, this little, basically the episode was Dorothy was like, she's working at the school or something, she's a substitute teacher, and this little girl is like she's like sad, like that, like she thinks like the world's gonna end, and she's so depressed. Actually, it was Betty White's character who's doing a scout troop, I think, and it was actually a really funny episode. But basically, this little girl, she's so sad that she thinks the world's gonna end. There's no point to growing up, and she's like, I don't want to grow up, and even to this day, that's kind of been brought on, and that was like I would say like early 80s. It was Golden Girls, so yeah, so it's kind of interesting, but this is I was thinking about the internet. Like the internet didn't exist until what, 19?
Well, technically it was started through colleges, and it actually was around 91, 92 that the email was like officially really awesomely working. My grandfather helped with a lot of that stuff as an accountant, but he was also like a mathematician, and he had a scientific calculator he paid like $4,000 for, and then would build his own computers with Amiga computers in the 80s. Wow. And was fiddling around with it. So the second the internet really was coming out, before AOL, I was already like up to date with it. He was telling me it would change the world, and had already he already knew so many people involved with it at Hewlett Packard, especially, that were doing so much, and was touring facilities. Put it this way, in my family, my dad in the 70s, right at the beginning, right before high school, he graduated in like 75, I think, 76, something like 74. He was born in 57. My dad went to junior high as a computer, and they thought he was TV. So my family's been in computers a long time, but the internet thing really came about 93, 94 with the Uranus-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn.
Right when I was being born. I forget I have that conjunction.
Oh, I know too many people with that conjunction.
Yeah, Pluto Scorpios too.
Yeah, I know too. I know too many with all that alignment. Or the Saturn and Uranus conjunction in 88 too, and 89. I know a lot of people with that, whether it's in Saturn, Capricorn.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that is ironic to me, since it did happen in Capricorn, and then we just had the Saturn and Pluto conjunction with Jupiter in Capricorn, and then the internet now has become not so liberating or free, that it was almost like a pipe dream, Uranus Neptune, right, in Capricorn, that there would always be control about it. And now we're seeing the control systems of it extreme with Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter. And of course, Saturn and Pluto met with Mercury on January 12th of 2020.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right. So there's some part of controlling of the mind, and it's not crazy as an astrologer to, in my opinion, to at least think that we're in a time period that's going to last a long time, where there's going to be people out to control people's minds.
Definitely people are certainly trying to have a sense of, it's like image. Capricorn is almost like that kind of image. It's also about integrity, but it's sort of like the difference between building a house out of cardboard versus wood and actual real material. And so I think because for everything we could say there's also the opposite. So it's control, but it's also, I suppose, rebellion, or that, I guess, the pushing against of that control, because no one can ever truly be fully controlled, and everyone will always, it's sort of like an inflammation, and if someone's being controlled or judged or criticized, that's what negative emotion is. It starts off that way, and no one's born to be a failure. No one was born to be the bad guy to take the fall.
Right.
And so when people have any sort of outdated beliefs, and I think that especially with all that the Capricorn and whatnot, because it was happening so late in the sign of Capricorn too. It really is this essence of what is true control.
It happened pretty much where Saturn and Pluto did meet with Mercury, which is trippy to me.
Yeah, and it's really bringing out, because especially with Jupiter and Cap and its traditional detriment, and with Saturn there and its rulership, I think the main theme about that, and I think that we're going to kind of sort of feel the echoes of that, so to speak, as Saturn is currently now in Aquarius and Jupiter in Pisces, which I think is very interesting indeed.
Yeah, we were actually talking about that last night about the ages and how the shifting
yeah.
from the age of Pisces to Aquarius, which is very cuspy at the moment, yet we saw the Mercury retrograde of 2020 after that event of Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and Mercury with the Sun in Capricorn with the South Node, and then seeing like, holy cow, that was a Mercury retrograde from Pisces over the end of Pisces to the beginning of Pisces over the end of Aquarius. Now we're seeing Jupiter do that, and then Saturn's on his way to do that. So there's so much just in this last year and a half of this stepping into that age, but it's also the stepping into the cusp of the age splitting and changing.
It's such an interesting time to be.
And so then you mix, like you just said, just having Jupiter and Pisces and Neptune, and Jupiter and Neptune and Pisces, and then having Saturn and Aquarius. Talk about far out. I mean,
once in a lifetime. We're not going to see that again.
Never.
No. God, I can't even.
Just even get Jupiter and Neptune and Pisces was the 1850s. Yeah. And so I was born with Jupiter and Neptune in my chart, and it's been fantastic for my life.
Yeah.
It's let me see so far wide and interdimensional at the same time.
Yeah, Jupiter and Neptune have a very interesting relationship with each other, especially because Neptune rules what Jupiter formerly did.
Yes.
And Pisces is the final zodiac sign, and so we could say it has the last laugh. And so Neptune, Jupiter has this kind of above all else perspective, I suppose you could say, and the sun, and we could get more into the esoteric and whatnot, but that I guess in the traditional sense, because Capricorn's noon o'clock, 12 o'clock at the top of the chart, and then Aquarius, Pisces, it's the final three.
I know.
And so
there's no fire there either. There's and technically, I know we call Pisces spiritual. Yeah. But the ether is the spirit itself. So the water element that's the most mutable is almost like the essence of spirituality itself. It's an understanding of the essence of it.
Yeah.
Through having to fully flow and feel and let go.
Experience. Pisces to me, in one word, I would say is experience. And to me, the mutable signs really talk about perception. In order, I would say Gemini's perception of thought, or I suppose we could say truth, Virgo's perception of reality, Sagittarius' perception of what I want to call
what's possible, or
the future,
the unknown, really too. It's got a Uranian kind of quality, just different.
Yeah, well, I was going to say Pisces is really the unknown too. It's the perception of the imperceptible. It's the perception of non-physicality, which is contrary to our physicalness. That's why Mercury exalts in Virgo and not Pisces, because our minds are designed for physicality and not, we're here to be physical. A lot of people are trying to get out of their bodies so much. And I think that's one reason why so many people are so depressed, because Neptune is complete confusion or complete clarity. It's sort of like, Pisces is psychedelics. It's the perception of something that's real, but how real is it? What are you connecting to? Because if someone's connecting to a train of thought or a belief, and that, because thoughts think, energy vibrates, and that will become more, and that's what eventually becomes thought form, which eventually becomes what we call consciousness. And so in Pisces, it's that pure madness or pure exaltation of it's the surrender, it's the complete trust in life. It's Neptune, it's the ocean. You're not going to beat against the current of the ocean. It's going to take you out to sea, and you either stay calm and you float at top, because that's your job, because it's not your job. You're not a deep sea animal.
No, you really are not here to drown. No. Just if you let go, we're here to drown, you will float.
And Pisces is trust. It's the final frontier. And to even sort of talk about the zodiac, Aries through Virgo is entirely about the self and self internalization, I suppose. And then once you get to Libra, Scorpio, Sag, it's kind of the individual going out there into the world and learning more about others. And then once you get to Cap, Aquarius, Pisces, that's sort of the it's almost like the graduation ceremony where it's like Capricorn is the mastery. You've mastered the skill, the emotions, the whatever. And then Aquarius is the sharing of it. And then Pisces is it's almost like, to be honest, Pisces is the literally incomprehensible, because it's sort of like, it's almost like asking the question, what do you want your next lifetime to be? You can't figure that out until you're done living this one. You're always going to be creating and living. And even when your heart stops beating, your consciousness still lives on. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only mixed around a bit. And so I think that when it comes to life, people try so hard to escape, or they they've been, because of course it's someone probably told them something incorrect. Religions have kind of been doing that for a while, with mixed intention, because there have been teachers throughout history. For example, the Jesus boy, he was separate from the church. He basically said, "Don't make me a king," and then everyone decided to make him a king, and they lost the message. And so it's tricky, because and even with him, if his words can only do so much, then it seems like, what can we do? And even he said, after he would heal someone, go forth and tell no one. Don't try to convince people of what's impossible for them, not for you, but for them. It's your faith that makes you whole, he said. And so, and it took me a while, because I was raised Catholic, so I had to sort of separate the man from the church, because it's easy to, especially 2,000 years ago, a lot can happen in 2,000 years. And so I think it's just, this is, an age where people are starting to, especially because think about the internet. You can pull up your phone and look up Hermetic Kabbalistic wisdom if you had the intention for it. It's out there. Yeah. And you were talking about control of the internet, and I was even sort of getting at how even there's the dark web. There's this, we have the conscious tip of the iceberg, so to speak, and then there's the dark web, which is underneath, and don't do anything illegal, but there's this entire world out there that certainly is not controllable. It's like prohibition 100 years ago, literally like 100 years ago, people tried to stop alcohol sales, and it completely and utterly failed. And think Capricorn is, it's
but it did change.
It's
an off-course place in American life where it was normal to have cider beer for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they would ring bells to go drink, to take off work for a moment and go back to work. So people were literally, you had cars that had come out. Yeah. You had people, and then you had, of course, the big immigration to America, the Germans creating these taverns and bars that were basically saloons in the cities that were only serving their own beer, and that's where the prostitutes were, and creating that in the cities. Yeah. And then you have everybody just drunk all the time. So the universe kind of does weird things to correct itself.
It's about the path of least resistance, and sometimes it's almost like, well, if the building's on fire, you're going to go down the really hot route or the less hot route. Right. And sometimes, and it always begs the question is, how did someone get there? Because the thing is about intuition, with trusting oneself, is that there's always help from the other side. There's always non-physical friends loving you, guiding you, supporting you, telling you where to go. One thing that I will say is that people call them spirit guides, ancestors. There's no wrong angels, no right or wrong word. It's all non-physical friends loving you. I will say that your non-physical friends will never tell you what to avoid. They will only tell you what to look towards, which sometimes might be going down the fiery route if the other route sucks. It's kind of like a bird's eye perspective. It's like if you're, we're in LA right now, if you're stuck in LA traffic and you don't know where the jam is and whatnot, but someone in a helicopter does, and they're talking to you on the phone or whatever, and they can guide you out of the jam. But if you're in the jam already, you're in the jam. And so I think a lot of people, it's almost like they beat themselves up for not being quote unquote smart enough, or for not knowing enough. Well, and even the academic world, it's like, you need to be this smart. There's only so many seats available. There's only it's very Forrest Gumpish, like seats taken. Yeah. But I really wanted to get into the depression part that you brought up. Oh yeah. And talking about that last quadrant, because it's like, as you brought up with Capricorn, that mastery, but really it's also the sun reaching a solstice point where it's at either the peak again or the peak of its loss. Yeah, and it's and really it's a building back up or building down again. But really, as we look at it from Western astrology, it's using the northern hemisphere. Mm-hmm. So it's that Capricorn element of like, this is where you put your bootstrap on and you build yourself up to the refresh point, where most people do the opposite, and they kind of like
fall down. And especially if you take, believe it or not, it was a book by Aleister Crowley, which I already know that's a name that's going to just, people are going to be like, oh, you're a Satanist and stuff. It's like, no, it's just like, as an astrologer, you look at all the information that you can, and Hermeticism is not about judgment of where you get the info, but try to see the truth. And he extensively wrote his only astrology book was about Uranus and Neptune. And he wrote deep about Neptune being depressed on how it is the farthest planet out, of course, because he was writing this in the 1890s, and that it's depressed out there because it's the outpost of the zodiac. It's the outpost of the planets, though, that's intuitively reading what's coming in, and almost like how it might talk to Jupiter, how you said Jupiter and Neptune's relationship, because there's imagery now when you see Jupiter and how its orbit is around the sun, and watching the asteroid belt, and how actually Jupiter's carrying the asteroid belt around, which is kind of crazy, right? But it's almost like that outpost of Neptune is our own intuitive. That's an outpost, but it's a depressive element as well with Neptune, because it's out there alone with its back to the sun, looking out at the vast unknown, and always constantly trying to search for what that is. And so I think with people, they can kind of get lost in that feeling like, I'm looking and I can't see what's happening. And that becomes where, ironically, Neptune was found by a brewer who had a bunch of money to buy a telescope, who finds Neptune, even though there was people prior who said they had found it. And there was a whole debacle and debate about who really was the one who found Neptune. But it was 1848. It was like, okay, this is Neptune, and they name it Neptune, and it represents alcohol too, and spirits, and spirit is alcohol too, and all that. And it becomes a place where that is a tricky thing. When you come out of Capricorn, you come into Aquarius, you have to pivot from, because like that's the whole thing. If you master, you just can't, you have to take that mastery and evolve with it, and you have to pivot. And it's the pivot where people screw up, and then they fall into Pisces, kind of like, I didn't pivot right. We all pivot however it might be. It's about realizing that spirit maybe made us pivot in a place that we don't know yet till we get to Aries, when it all becomes an understanding, and I'm on that road now, and that's a hard one for people, I think, in the times we're in. Just think of all the retrograde planets right now. Pluto in Capricorn retrograde, Saturn in Aquarius retrograde, Jupiter in Pisces retrograde, and Neptune. The three signs, the last quadrant, is where all the retrogrades are.
And Mercury just finished too. So this is an interesting time, and it's the final three are so almost different in temperament too. Where it's, if you have, for example, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, they're all kind of youthful, and they all, they're all kind of, simple in a good way. And it's Aries is simple. It's desired. Do I want this or no? Do I want that or no? Am I hungry? Yes or no? And then Pisces is it's ultimate complexity, but it's also ultimate simplicity, because it reroutes back to Aries. It has to go back to the basics, so to speak. It's the unknown, and from that unknownness, what do I want? It really is this. It's Neptune. It's complete depression and confusion, or it's complete love and compassion, and it's that holiness that people either only get to when they die, because no matter who you are or where you end up, when you kick the bucket, you go back to source, and you feel that Piscean ocean of love that people are craving for. It's like that almost Van Gogh, that reaching, that Piscean. I don't know much about Van Gogh, but I'm sure he has some Piscean Neptune.
I mean, he cut his ears off. He was pretty. I don't know what
he got something going on.
He got something going on there. But what I thought was, I always actually look at Van Gogh as Aquarius, because he used individual dots.
Oh, I see what you.
Right. Yeah. So it was like, I don't know. There's something about that, and how we're the unique individual color and dot that makes up a whole pole.
Picture, And he never resisted. He never said, "Okay, we're gonna segregate you," and go like that. Like some people think the Aquarian essence is, but Aquarian is Uranian, and it's interesting because it's the necessary diversity which makes the world go round.
Correct.
Especially even thinking about the United States and how we're such a
melting
homogenous melting pot. And there's other parts of the world which aren't so like that. And so it's so interesting.
Not very many.
Not many people. I love Japan. I love Japanese culture. I would love to visit Japan. It's so different. And it's like the population there is like 98% like native Japanese folk. Someone like me going over there, they'll call me.
But they love Americans, or they love all people. Japanese people love tourism, and they love everybody from the world. And I think
it's different.
I think it's also been written in the media wrong. You live in Massachusetts. I live in California. I've been all across America on tours. I don't know one state that doesn't have a whole tourism department and you live in a place where there's massive tourism. I live in a place where there's massive tourism.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not like we're like, get out of here.
Yeah.
I think like it's more just like, oh, there's not enough parking today.
Literally.
Like that's about it.
Right? Don't tell them your favorite
or,
beach.
oh, there's a lot of traffic or whatever. But like, it's not like, get out of here. I don't want you as an individual person because you're from here. It's almost like, oh, you're from there? Awesome.
Yeah. For me, it's like, oh, you're here? Wonderful. Enjoy your stay. Pick up your litter and stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Literally, because people will drive too slow. That's just my pet peeve. We're both Mars third houses. We hate
Last
slow.
night we're in my AMG and he's like, I want you to drive me fast. I'm like, okay. So we went fast and we stopped at the light and he looks at me and goes, my Mars is in the third, right? And I went, oh yeah. And I looked at him, you get it. And then I just hammered it.
It was so good. I never
it
got
was
fast
it was
cars
only
until I was
an
in
astrologer could have that kind of talk.
Yeah,
and not
so
have to go
funny.
deeper into it.
To
just
it
be
and
like,
into it, yes, exactly.
and just be this shit like, oh, you
Exactly.
get it, bah, like
Exactly, and it all because we know our own charts, and I'm sure we can understand each other's too. And so I think it's so interesting to see how because there is pre-birth intention, and of course, to be fair, no one wants their entire life story figured out before they come here, because before you come here, you trust and you have guidance every step of the way. It's like OnStar, but perfect every single time, and you can call it whenever you want. But it's like if you're in a tunnel and you've got a cell phone, even if the call's there 24/7 trying to get to you, you can't hear the other person. And it's not because the message of love or trust or support or the stuff even isn't there. It's just that either you're not in range of it, or you just don't want it right away. It's like you don't want to eat all the delicious
Or maybe it's not a phone, it's a pager.
Yeah.
And the signs and the planets and all the things, and we get signs in life. I used to be a pager person. 143 was like, oh, my girlfriend loves me. Or 911 was like, shit. I better I need to get home.
Yeah.
Or I need to get to a payphone to call you. Because I lived in the days of payphones. And then it was like, I had to learn because, going in high school and shit, it wasn't like I was rich or anything. I'm a fucking kid. And, my mom was a single mom who she did remarry, but it wasn't like we just like were. People think I was like filthy rich or something as a kid. Fuck no. Like I was calling 1-800-COLLECT to my mom's house, and I would just be like, when it said state your name, I'd just be like, pick me up over here, and then hang up.
I heard it. I've never done that, but I've heard of people doing that. That's awesome.
But I feel like it's like a pager where it's like, I loved paging because it was just like, okay, the messages come through from that number. It's my best friend. And we used to use that's where 143 came from. That's where 911 came from. That's where like boob came from, 808.
808.
Like it would be like, like I'd be like, oh, my buddy's, busy with a girl.
Yeah.
Like it would just like, it's just like, you don't need the actual like full phone call from God. Like,
people
it's
want
like
the clouds to part and the golden light, and they want like Archangel so-and-so or Jesus Christ or whoever to come down. And it's ironic because they are giving you what you want, but it might, people want things and then they think they want things. And it's kind of tricky because it's like if you enjoy watching movies, you enjoy watching something not knowing what's going to happen. And people, it's that kind of Piscean. It's like, I wonder what's around this corner versus, I wonder what's around this corner. It's that, do I fear or do I trust? It's extreme Pisces in its own subtle way. It's not like Scorpio or even Capricorn or even Aquarius. It's this hit or miss, but it's the most
mutable of all the energy too.
Yeah.
Mutable water.
Yeah. It's the most subtle, mutable, changing. It's the one that you don't notice the most.
Right, because like right now, 75% of our Earth is ocean. 75% to 80% of our bodies are water.
Yeah.
But it's like something that we're not paying attention to, or like, I don't know just even 30 miles off the coast right now what the water's like at the moment, or what it's doing, or what the waves are, how many waves there are, how many
The animals and what they're doing.
and what they're doing, and there's a hidden element of all the animals and something else beyond that under there
Cthulhu.
too. Right, so there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
But it on top, it just looks like it's fine.
It's fine. It's so fun. It's so funny.
Or it looks like it's mayhem, but you don't even realize, well, what's the mayhem? It's
Below
not
the surface.
the mayhem's maybe not even below the surface. It came from somewhere else too, right? Like the tsunamis
I was
always
just
come from
thinking that, and the boats on top, they don't even feel it.
Right.
And if they're far out away.
And Michael Luton loves to tell the story of the 2004 tsunami in Indonesia. There was a couple, they went scuba diving. So they went down. The tsunami hit, and those are horrible videos if you don't remember the Indonesian
I remember
one.
the man just standing there. Oof.
Right? And like people in their hotels having to go to like fourth floors because the first 2-3 levels
flooded,
just gone, and so many people died.
Yeah.
But then how creepy would that be to then come up after your long scuba diving session, and you come up and you're like, where's the beach?
Where's the beach?
And that happens to us in life, though, with not only Pisces transits, but I feel like Aquarius of having to learn to pivot.
I think that's what that really is. It's that
shock
wave.
It's a shock wave that's without a shock, the subtleness you talk about. But adding this Aquarius is the shockingness that you have to pivot now. Like it's like I'll just bring it up. Some people in here was like, "Where's Craig?" It's like, what? Like, okay, like it's an interview with Apollodite. So like,
sorry, I'm not everyone else.
Sorry, it's not Craig. But it's like people keep realizing, like, it's like the network, we all are pivoting without them. We love them. But there's a part of Aquarius that goes, you have to move on. The show has to move on. And same with Leo. And there's always the oppositions, the pairing of like the show must go on. You got to let it go and disconnect from what's not to connect to anymore. It's not so cold when you realize there's nothing there anymore. It's like, and it's non-attachment emotionally to what's not there.
Yeah, and it's
opposed to that's where depression also hits people.
Yeah,
is it connecting to emotional positions that there's nothing even there? It's an empty box, but you're mad that the box is empty. It's like, why are you emotional if it's gone? Like if the milk is spilled, why are you crying over spilled milk? Like
there's not enough resources. Wanting milk is bad. Money's the root of all evil. And there's these all outdated beliefs that people are starting to even realize that it's got to go. Because money's not going anywhere. I think even with Uranus and Taurus, this is a time where people are realizing the value of not just money, but the value of value, the value of prioritizing, the value of, especially with this COVID, this was the ultimate prioritization that I could ever think of. It really made people think about what matters to me, especially the Capricorn cardinal, where am I investing my time and my energy in? And talking about the pivot, it is kind of that, it's almost like the moon in Capricorn, how traditionally it's in its detriment position, but we could say it's the true mastery of emotion, where you don't deny yourself feeling, but instead you allow yourself to feel, but you have that earthy, dry Capricorn, which kind of takes the water and makes mud and makes bricks and houses, and it's what turns ore to steel eventually, and you make skyscrapers out of it, and because talking about kind of the axes, basically we could look at the 12 signs as 6 pairs of 2, and so every sign is really the 2 signs, and so I think with a lot of Capricorn focus, especially with that trio going on, it really also kind of highlighted the Cancer side of things, or potentially lack thereof, because if Capricorn's 12 o'clock. Cancer is the 6th, the foundation. If you dropped something in it, gravity would bring it down to the bottom. And so, and because Cancer's water, Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces now, Jupiter exalts in Cancer because the abundant, the wise follow their emotions. They follow the wisdom of how they feel. The moon's the fastest moving planet in astrology because your moods are always very fast.
And it's once a month, moon month.
Yeah, exactly. Moon Monday.
Right.
But that was really interesting, finding out that Monday's the moon day, Tuesday's day
Which
of
is
Mars.
why everybody dreads Mondays.
Mondays.
Or loves Mondays. It depends
Yeah.
on where you're at in your mood.
Yeah.
And I feel that, that's the weird part about the moon out of every, if we're calling everything a planet.
Yeah.
It's the only
Celestial
thing that
body.
is itself, it's orbiting, but it doesn't have its own orbit itself, like where you're not seeing it spin.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something weird about that on how the gravitational pull and force on the planet, it makes sense that it wouldn't if it's pulling on something.
It's mutual, yeah.
There's a mutual anything, but it's where our emotions, like Christopher Witteggy, who's also my other most favorite astrologer and my greatest mentor, it's the wolf in sheep's clothing, right? Because it's like we get in our chart, wherever our moon is, you can really feel that vibe so much, and you can get pulled there so much, and you can get lost there. But it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, like, because the sun's the one place where it's the most constant. It is. The sun's the most constant. That's why it's fixed fire, Leo, and it's nonstop. It's the biggest, and it's the place in your chart where that's focus there first. Like Michael Luton always says, when it's all going down shitty in your life or whatever transit you're going through, just go back to your sun sign and what house is it in.
Yeah.
And be that.
Keep it simple.
Like go back to your root and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
If you're Capricorn and you're in the 6th house, like go back to working out and having your schedule and going to bed at time, whatever you want to do. Like, know, boom, you'll get back on track. Like, if you're a Pisces in the 10th, it's like go back to your dreamy,
be a poet, whatever.
Yeah, life that you like to do, and like make sure that you stay on track though, and like don't get caught up in a weird space. You know what I mean? Like
and every position's different too.
Correct.
Sun in Aries is different than Sun in Libra. Sun in Aries 7th house is different than Sun in Libra 1st house.
Right, exactly.
And so I think it's fun as an astrologer to kind of help people figure out what their preferences are and to help them not beat themselves up for having it. Especially because we all, again, and everyone likes variety. No one wants to eat the same damn food over and over and over again. It's nice to be consistent, and it's nice to have a base point, and it's nice to know what works for you. And I think sometimes it's almost like people are scared to. I think we talked about this kind of like with the spilt milk, because it's almost like they're scared that if they buy the milk, there's not going to be any more. You know what I mean?
It's like the toilet paper thing.
Yeah. And so people hoard it, and that, ironically enough, creates the hoarding problem.
I know.
But if everyone took their fair share, now the thing is that when it comes to life, you can never be greedy enough for life. If you want a lover, it's fine. If you want possessions, people think having possessions and earthly things is a bad thing, and it's like, I don't know why you came to an earthly place filled with dirt unless you wanted to get your hands dirty sometimes. And it's like, you don't need to. People think I have to go convince. I got to go stand on a soapbox and convince someone of something, which even people will say, like, Jesus did that. And Jesus, he practiced for years. He was born, miracle baby, and then he's just like no adolescent. Like, I don't remember being taught about Jesus' teenage years.
No, you don't hear about his journeys to the East to learn meditation, Buddhism. And that's where anointing of the king and the idea also came, because there was oils that he learned on his trail with his mother that they went together, and they learned all that and then came back, and that's where he also learned the healing practices, which actually come from the East. Yeah. Which most Catholics or people would have a hard time hearing that. Yeah.
Even the notion of prayer from the West versus the East. Western prayer is, I desperately need this thing I don't have, and I'm begging, pleading, demanding that you, God, outside of me, who may or may not love me, give me this thing that I may or may not deserve.
And only on Sundays.
When I don't eat before church. Did you ever have to do that?
No.
It was so weird. I was told this weird rule, like, you can't eat before church because God's going to hate you for being fat or whatever, or for enjoying your food.
That's new for me.
Well, I think it was just a lie that my mom told me just to stop asking for food or whatever. But we're in a time where people are realizing that, on what I was talking about, Eastern prayer is just simply appreciation. It's appreciation for someone. I can't remember his name. A Japanese doctor. He did a little experiment with water, with water, and a Buddhist monk prayed in the water, and he quote unquote healed the water.
Yeah,
it literally reformed the molecular structure of the water, and that's something that really
Pisces would be a big deal to look at.
Well, it's the idea of my thoughts and intentions are reflecting in this world, and that's powerful. And especially even using the astrology of it, because it's pre-birth intention plus individual wants, which make up the collective wants, because no one should ever feel like they should give up what they want for other people. That's not what the collective consciousness, because a lot of people use different words. It's not a person. It's not a person deciding for all people.
Who started using that term, and nobody was using it before. It used to be called the collective unconscious.
Yeah, which is so interesting to me, because by definition, the word unconscious is not conscious. It's not aware. And your awareness is the power where everything lies. And that's what I think, was it Chris who said, talk about focusing on the sun, or
Michael Luton.
Michael Luton, yeah. I read that book that you gave me.
John Dee's book?
John Dee's book. And even he pointed out how the moon reflects the sun's light.
Mm-hmm.
The moon doesn't have her own light, which is fine. And then we could even say the sun is the light of all lights, and all the planets reflect light. And so it's this, you have the biggest, brightest thing in the sky, and then you have the most personal Luna orbiting the Earth, and together they do this dance. And I can't remember. It's like the sun is like 400 times distance away and bigger, and that's right, and that's why the eclipses can happen so perfectly. And even I remember learning about how an average lunar cycle 28 and a half days, average menstrual cycle 28 and a half days, and so
actually if you average out the months too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is funny that February, which rules that transition from Aquarius into Pisces, is a 28-day month.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Right, and that's a very
emotional. The calendar is such a
I've already
David's done a wonderful video on it, by the way. And so
Age of Deception.
Age of Deception.
It was like a whole. It was a lot more. It was a whole.
It's a really good. You should go and watch it if you haven't. It's amazing. It's free. It's free. It's on YouTube. It's
5 hours long. Cut to 5 hours long.
Exactly. So it's a great video. But yeah, it's so interesting watching all of this and just being a human being here on Earth, and it's like doing all this, talking here, having a wonderful conversation, and then eventually I'm gonna fly back to Massachusetts and just go about my usual day, and just like, oh, there's Joe Schmo, they don't know what's going on or whatever, and it's funny because all we can do is the best that we can, and I think that especially as a daily horoscope astrologer, it's about doing what you can in the moment and not worrying so much about yesterday or even tomorrow, because your power really is in the now. And it's tricky because vibration is timeless. And so, for example, when you want something, the vibration of it has already begun reverberating. And so you can't stop desire. You can't stop wanting. You can't stop being who you are. People, for a very long time, for centuries, you couldn't like the same sex without being seen as demonic. And it's ironic because in ancient cultures, people who experienced attraction to just the regular, man, woman, they, Native Americans called them two-spirit. There's all these different, terms and whatnot. And not to say anyone's better than anyone else, but it's so interesting how you can't resist who you are and what you want and what you like. And when people create belief structures, whether it's by life experience, because we've all come to conclusions about life, even if no one directly said, this is what life's about. I'm your mom, your dad, your teacher, whoever. And then there are times like that. This is what life's about. I'm old and crotchety. My life didn't go well. Your life's going to suck too. And, to give them credit and to not judge them because, they did have a rough
Well, I think if you look at all history and you look at history that does start getting crazy about who should be with who and how it should be for love, whether it's the church, their issues with that has been
forever
actually causing way more harm, because then they start going after young boys right?
Yeah,
Like,
tell me, and then where are the problems?
exactly, which it's like they have their issues with that.
Yeah.
Or you look at the Roman period in the bathhouses, and then if you actually you can look at it in so many different areas, but it's like when people start stigmatizing it, you should look behind who's stigmatizing it, because they're going way deeper in a weirder hole with it all.
Yeah, for sure,
And
for sure.
that's the negative aspect of when you try to put bad energy like in the water. Same thing with like the drought right now, right? You think the water feels good when the media pushes on all the minds around the world, like you need to be scared of the drought, because that's what we did with here in the West. And it's like they did that to us for the last like 5 years, and then in 2018 into 2019 was the biggest rain that we had in 20 something years, and we were overfilled with water. Now we have no water. What happened to it?
Yeah,
like it's like one of those things where it's like Native Americans, like, you know, they would trust, and they would tap in, and they would listen, and they would rain dance, and they would, you know, it's like the magistrates, if there was an issue, it wasn't the senators, it wasn't the emperor. When it got to craziness, the magistrates would come in, and the magistrates would tell the emperor and the senators and the people, this is where you're all fucking up. We have a famine because everybody's tripping about this, and everybody's not living in their alignment, wherever that is, and this will fix it. We don't have that in today's world.
Yeah, we don't.
We have, no, create something in a lab and force it on everybody. And then we look at scientists right now as magistrates, when they're anything but a magistrate, and they're not. And then John Dee's book, which I love so much,
it's a good read.
The Hieroglyphic Monad, is because he actually uses not only math, but he also shows on how the issue in life, even with the alchemists back then, a lot of them he made fun of, was because they were not fully 100% trusting in the divine and using the divine to find the answers in life.
Yeah.
That you don't use your intellect to judge the truth, because you're judging what is true, and you're a judgmenter, you're a bigot to truth. Yeah. Intellects are bigots to truth.
I read, I was driving.
That's my version of it.
Well, it was interesting because I was driving home. I was driving somewhere, and basically some, radio talk show person was like, "Oh, fun fact of the day" or whatever. And I don't remember the exact number. It was probably like 75 or 80% of people would much rather have someone who is kind and happy and compassionate, and maybe not so quote unquote smart, than a snobby intellectual type. And I think for good reason, because there's that element of it's interesting because there's nothing wrong with wanting to understand how life works, but it's interesting how, because I was raised Catholic. I've got the Catholic side, was, I guess, for all intents and purposes, an atheist for like 10 years. So I've had the spiritual or the science side, the skeptical side. Now, to be fair, if it wasn't for my skepticism and my critical mind, I could potentially still be Catholic, and not to jump on any Catholics or anything, but to just be told something, this is how life is, especially if the message is off, like based in judgment or something, it's never going to resonate and feel good. So I think it's kind of it's sad to see how the healthy question of what is or what if has been, because technology is based on what if. What is going, the Wright brothers were the first one to build the plane, but they weren't the first ones to think of it. People have been thinking about flying machines since at least Egypt, if not earlier.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's very interesting to see how people are using criticism of not of thoughts or ideas, which is fair, but instead of people. And it's so sad to see, even.
Well, and it's happening everywhere, but it's happening in astrology too.
Yeah.
Rick Levine just did an interview with Sam Reynolds, which I love Sam Reynolds, but him and I have had our clashes, but we always can talk things out. But he brought up something very good about, because he's really about trying to understand the diversity issue with astrology. And he brings up a really good point in the interview about how astrology was just men writing horoscopes for other men for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And then, women got integrated.
Yeah.
And now it's about different cultures coming in.
Yeah.
But when you look at like the planets and their rulerships and their essential dignities, right? If somebody has a falled planet, it's almost kind of like, oh, you know, that's a diversity issue that's coming up a lot now. And also making sure, like what Sam's doing is making sure that there's voices from all corners and actually I agree with Sam, because that's what I was saying is I was like, this is like an old boys club, all these freaking astrology, like, boards.
Yeah.
And how it was like, okay, like, unless you're on the board, you get to speak. Like, we all get 2 lectures at the thing because we're throwing it, and we're only going to give 33% of the speakers who are not on a board the speaking thing. But we're taking 2 of them. So you can have an astrologer on a board who hasn't spoke for or written a book or done a horoscope since 1982, and they're up there in 2018, like doing 2 lectures.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's kind of like, I think there's a diversity issue when it comes to astrology and criticism. Or like somebody just put in here, David, Pisces is the most beautiful sign. It's like, no, all the signs are the most beautiful. And they have their own unique way of being beautiful.
Yeah.
And then a falled planet, short, it's going to have its differences because it's not at its place, but it's going to give an other point of view that other people don't have. Like I have Jupiter in Capricorn. And that's it's the great benefic. So to have the great benefic and fall is kind of like a shitty thing. But to me, it's like, I look at it as like, I get one big wish.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's focused, and it's in how to create all this. I don't look at all these other roads. I only look at the big road that's the most important, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I only research about that. I don't research if it's not part of that road. I don't research it. I don't need to.
There's benefit in all positions.
Correct.
It's not, and I have Mars and Libra, and it's
detriment.
And it's detriment. So, my sense of personal power. I've always been scared of being powerful because it puts a target on your back in a sense. Sometimes, if someone sees you being confident, having something you don't have, living a life you don't have, even just having an opinion, sometimes it's like, do I want to share this? And to be fair, there is a time and place. It's taught me that some battles are worth engaging. Sometimes it's best to lose a battle and win the war. And in terms of metaphor, in terms
and diplomacy, Mars and Libra
it's taught me
is
to be
about
nice, especially because it's such a first house
about
layout.
ruling through diplomacy, which is important because sure, Mars and Aries might be the great warrior,
Yeah.
But there's times in life where like we do not need to just keep having bloodshed. We need to have diplomacy and find peace, and that is always possible.
Yeah, and even Mars and Aries, the god of war, bloodshed, violence. Even a simple disagreement is Aries in nature.
Right, exactly.
It's I want to go to this restaurant. Oh, I want to go to this one. And it's not wrong. It's just individual desire and preference. And then even Libra is, okay, well, maybe there's a third option. It's that it's the compromise. And that's true for all positions. Mercury and Sag, Venus and Scorpio, it goes on and on and on and on. And so I think that people use astrology in this almost it's like, oh, you were born this way, I guess you're going to die, or you're gonna suck, or you're gonna be a loser, or whatever. You're gonna be single forever. Guess you're never gonna get that dream lover you want, which is never, ever, ever true. Never, ever, ever true.
Well, it's kind of like astrology racism.
That's a good. It's judgment. It's discrimination. Yes, I've heard some people.
But it's a weird line because it's like, we're not talking about the color of people's skin. We're not talking about their cultural background. We're talking about a predetermined alignment from the divine, which is the same as the color of your skin, which is the same as wherever you were born. Yeah. But it's one of those things where it's like, it's okay to be like, yeah, I have a sun in Leo. It's at home. It is
awesome.
It is awesome. But and with any place exalted, or if it's at home in its dominant position, it's like one of those placements where you better use that thing in the best way because
you've got
it's so much power.
Yeah.
You can use it in the wrong way too.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Sure. Sometimes it's nice to be able to quote unquote start from the bottom so you can figure out. It's like it's absence makes the heart grow fonder, and it's true. And it's, of course, there's a difference between denying yourself something. For example, when you feel hungry, you're not starving yet. You're just feeling hungry, and then you eat, and then you feel better, and then eventually you get hungry again, and then you eat, and then people don't freak out about that unless, if money's tight, then of course there's that background. But realistically, everyone understands that I'm going to desire for food eventually. You're breathing all the time. You desire oxygen constantly. You don't even, that's kind of where the unconscious comes in, because your cells have intelligence too. Your body is this almost Aquarian amalgamation of trillions of little consciousnesses all working together with the express purpose of giving you a physical body so you can have a life experience.
Totally.
And so I think that it's also interesting because the cells have preference too. Cells, people think, for example, even with autoimmune conditions, and this isn't supported by modern science at all, but people will say, my body's out to get me. Your body's not out to get you. If anything, it's certainly receiving a signal, something's wrong, but where's that signal coming from? Where is the idea coming from? Because it's one thing if someone keeps eating McDonald's or something, and it's going to clog up your arteries, and so
I mean, but then you have on record in America, especially the oldest living people, the number one place for them to have their birthday parties is at Taco Bell, and their favorite meals are Taco Bell.
Yeah.
So you it's one of those things in life where it's like, maybe this is my 12th house sun. And you have the sun in the first, where it's like my 12th house sun is just like, live happy in your soul, and whatever feels right in your soul, you'll know as a 12th house energy or a Piscean energy of where you're not aligned with God and spirit anymore. I eat McDonald's if it's in the morning.
And especially if someone, it might be the best thing for someone.
For me, it's more just like, because I'm such a 12th houser, it's like, I haven't eaten. It's 5 a.m. I'm going home. There's McDonald's right here. I need to put this in my body, and I'm gonna get an orange juice, and I'm gonna get an egg McMuffin, because at least they actually use a real egg and they crack it. Yeah. Like I'm gonna get an egg.
Yeah. And then
it's like, okay, put it in my body, and that's it. And I don't even think about it. But then there's like, I went through anxiety for a long time in my life, and it gets to a place to where you just start creating your own suffering, like, and you believe, and you start actually. It's not even a belief. It's like a dogmatic, this is happening to me, and I will not listen to any other person's viewpoint at all.
Yeah.
And for me to get out of my panic disorder, anxiety disorder, I mean, it got it to the point to where, not suicide, but to the point where I'm writing in a journal, like, where else am I going to go when I'm having a panic attack 8 hours a day? I'm not even able to, like, I have agoraphobia. I can't leave my house. The wind would hit my window and I would have a panic attack. Like, I don't know why, when I've had wind. I mean, and I got to a place where I finally had to surrender and be like, okay, maybe all this stuff for all these years and me, that's why I cut out caffeine. That's why I cut out certain foods. That's why I just started like trying to fix everything.
Yeah.
And it's very Mercury Virgo-ish, right? And I had progressed Mercury Virgo retrograde, squaring my Uranus at the time of my panic disorder, and also was squaring my Chiron and Gemini, which I do have Chiron and Gemini. So it is mental stuff that I have to figure out this life. And it was a huge moment of learning, wow, that's how powerful the mind can shift out of things.
Oh, yeah.
And change things. And I see it in the spiritual community so much, especially when it comes to health.
Yeah.
Right. Or, even a lot of the truthers right now is just like automatically criticizing people as if like, what are you putting into your body? Yeah. Like, why are it's just like, hey, everybody's gonna put in whatever's gonna work to get us through this life happy and right. And there's something really weird about whether it's weight or whether it's how we look. And again, this is all media based. Neptune is bringing up 165 years of media based, whether it was pamphlets, books, cartoons. You can go on all sectors. I mean, you can go into magazines. Yeah. You can go into tabloids. You can go into reality shows. You can go into soap operas, advertisements. That is being purged. That's a cycle. A cycle takes it all, understands what it was, and resets.
Yeah.
And we're not at the full reset till it exits. So it's like the last 10 degrees of Pisces is the most, talk about the end of the road, and also where all you have is the highest of the Lord that you must connect with and surrender.
Yeah.
When it comes to how you live your life at this moment spiritually, there is no right or wrong way. Only you can gauge that individually through your own soul and what feels divine from God within your own soul.
Exactly.
And and it's hard for me when I see somebody be like, well, it's because you eat that. Or, gosh, everybody makes fun of my sprites. I own it.
I love your Sprites.
Even more,
'Cause
yeah.
It's wonder and to be fair, someone could eat McDonald's every single day and be healthy, but it's the train of mind that they're putting it, because if they're judging themselves for eating it, or even if someone gets McDonald's but then they judge fast food, or then they judge unfair systems. And so I think people, it really is the attitude. It's mercurial, and especially with the John Dee book as well. Mercury is definitely very interesting. It's so interesting. Yeah, it's in traditional 7-planet astrology.
And it's the king.
Yeah.
It's the king of all of the planets.
Yeah, and it's
Because it
humblest,
really does
subtlest way.
fit all the planets within it.
Yeah, it's the most neutral and temperament-wise, because all the planets have their own kind of, I guess, theme, element, personality, if you will. But Mercury is such an interesting one. He's
because in that book, John Dee describes it's like the second Mercury.
Yeah.
But what it is what, and it's the ether, and it involves the Aries glyph at the bottom of it to make it to form Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars.
Yeah.
With Venus, with Mercury, with the sun, with the moon. But what's interesting about it is it's not, you don't see it on a chart. You don't see it in a glyph anywhere, because it's the same thing like God. Like, you can see how it's constructed, but you can't see it. And you have to be able to understand the point, which he gets really deep about the point in that one, which is very mercurial, right?
Yeah.
Like, you should be using your mind to get to the point to understand the divine's truth. That's basically what it is. And it's something that, science and everything is never going to be able to find.
Science
it's like
is hitting a glass ceiling right now.
It's always going to hit a glass. It always has. Where it's even when they're trying to find God through a God particle. It's like,
I was thinking,
and that actually is probably the biggest deception that's ever happened on the planet, of smashing in these hydrogen colliders. There's one in Chicago too, where they've been playing with it. But when you do it in the year of 2012, you do it with the galactic energy of the sun changing its position in the galactic plane. You smash particles together. Maybe the Mayans, the Mayans were right. We did end the world we were in, and this is the new world. And there might be something to those hydrogen, aspects and those particles of the atoms that they smashed together that did change the dimension that we are in. You try to always go back to 2011 prior of your life of 2012, and you're just like, that's a different vibration completely. But there's that weird element of, multiple dimensions, and, it's like everything's the same, but there's something different.
To be honest, it's kind of interesting.
Even our identities. Yeah. Like, I really became an astrologer that does, this is my life, like, for real. That was not the course in my head at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or my soul. Like, it just, that wasn't what I ever believed would be possible or happen. And especially for me, 2012 was the year where I ditched leaving the idea that I would just be continuing a reality star career and being homeless with a laptop doing a daily horoscope every day. I was like, nobody's ever done a daily video collective conscious horoscope. I'll do it.
Let's do it. I love it.
I had nothing else, but
love it.
It created this. And if I wouldn't have done that, and everything prior to that 2012 moment that I thought I was going to be, if I would have stayed on those roads and entered into the portal of December 21st, 2012, I don't know if I would be here.
Yeah. And it's so tricky thinking about how, because our personalities are made up by what we experience and what we learn and what we think, what we understand, what we think to understand. It's tricky because around 2012, I was just starting like senior year of high school. So I feel like I was already like growing and changing, but there's something interesting about, if I can speak for, like those born, especially in 95, that Scorpio, end of Pluto Scorpio into Sag, Uranus, Neptune conjunction, even Jupiter. Jupiter and Sag. I have Jupiter and Sag and Pluto and Scorpio. No one's ever going to get that ever again in the next 300 years.
I know.
Goes by. It's so, and mine was even over the course of just a few months.
And it was after a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction.
Yeah.
Like we're in right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting. This and time, quote unquote, is speeding up. Time is perceptual, and because if let's say you could be immortal and you never needed food, water, anything, and you were locked into a room and no clock and there's no outside, time would essentially stand still for you. And it's
Right.
kind of hard because no one's immortal and we all have food. We have a biorhythm, but time is perception
You can
based.
step out of time
Yes,
as an astrologer because you are stepping into, when you run a progression, when you run a solar arc on somebody on their chart, when you are stepping into other time aspects of putting planets where they never have been or never are going to be, but actually tapping into the real multidimensional timelines that actually are there, that cannot be seen, which again is another thing of why science will never work,
because science needs the proof before it gets the confirmation. But you need the faith in order to get the proof. You get belief, expectation and beliefs are almost the same word, because if you expect something, you believe it's going to happen or it's relevant, and if you believe something, you must expect it to some degree, even if you don't fully believe in it. And I think that a lot of people are really starting to not necessarily even consciously, I suppose, face what they're expecting, but people are starting to become, people are making memes about, living in a reality, this is the Matrix and whatnot. And I think, it's great. But I think that it's certainly, it's such a weird time to be. And so, again, because science needs the proof, but you can't get.
Well, and there's proof there. Like astrology has the proof of the planet and the rotations. And I mean, it's the most constant thing you could ever find in the universe. There's nothing else that you can actually go, the moon will be here exactly in 27 seconds. Like, or the eclipse will happen on this day 200 years from now and it will be there.
Yeah, you could go 10,000 years.
Right, exactly. You can go infinite in any direction. So it is the most constant thing. It is the core of all alchemy. It is the core of, even the periodic table for science was an alchemy one, and it had planets in it.
Yeah, all the planets have a metal or
but I mean, you would see Saturn in there. You would see Mercury in there, like you used to see in the old alchemy ones.
Yeah, even from what I learned about the periodic table of elements and energy and whatnot, and it's interesting because the different elements are different. Hydrogen is not sulfur, is not silver, is not gold, is not lead, and they all have their different vibrations. They all have their different properties. For example, magnets, metal magnets specifically, are made up of iron, and iron magnets don't attract wood, they don't attract air, they don't attract water, they attract metal, and specifically metal. And if you look at the elements, I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but if iron attracts itself, it also attracts, I think, the next three next to it, but it doesn't attract silver or gold or things that are too different. That which is likened to itself is drawn, and that's just one physics of this universe. And so when you apply that to astrology and how it all comes together, and even just the simple power of the mind, hermeticism, it's hermetic, it's mental, it's the mind, it's Hermes of Greek mythology, it's that Gemini Virgo mental ship. But it's interesting because you can't,
it's the duality of seeing things while it's also seeing this crazy sun that Mercury has to one side, and a planet, no other planet has that
intimacy
element to understand. There's no moon on Mercury.
It's either blazing hot on one side or the coldest of the cold on the other.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to me too, because it's at a position in life of understanding that in order to find truth or to find these things, you have to look at this extremely divine nature that the sun itself, the fact that it doesn't have a clear understanding of how it's there and how it emits its light. It's a just knowing of, which I don't even want to use that word, but it would be much more of just an essence in trust, and that you can see that there's a magical divine union that's bonded to the galaxies, and that the stars have binary star systems. The stars in different galaxies are all have supernova events. There's black holes. There's there's so much that goes on with that that's beyond where science is ready to go with mixing the understanding of the elements and how do you bring these two things together.
True physics.
And that's what alchemy but mainly Hermeticism is bringing those two sides and being willing to look at the masculine, the feminine, the dark, the light, the understanding. Like it was always in old Hermetic pictures. It was always, believe it or not, you'd always see the lion for the masculine, and then you see the antelope for the feminine, and like looking at those things all through life, but also taking it in something again that's not seen, because it always pointed up to Yeshua or God, right, in this beautiful heaven and with the zodiac around it, and seeing the planes of existence, that there's two planes of existence. There's this reality, which always showed a very Saturnian-like element to things of like, okay, there's a control system, there's a time system, there's an order there, but then there's a divine order above, and that divine order and that order in this reality, you must know how to combine both together. And if you can't combine both together, then you ain't got truth.
Yeah, it's tricky because people are trying to separate one from the other. You can't separate spirit or God from the physicality, and people are trying to, and it won't work. People, trying to go to, caves or whatever. And to be fair, everyone can use a good hermit phase every once in a while to go within self, because God is present within all things. But if you can't see the God in others, you're not going to be able to. If you're going out in the crowd, you're going to see a bunch of kind of crappy stuff because that's what you're expecting from people. And so it's tricky, because sometimes the best thing that you can do for yourself is to bail out. But it's like Jesus, he wanted to, not just because he had to. No, I'm being dragged. No, he wanted to be a teacher. He wanted to go out there and to work with people. And no one's forcing anyone, of course, to be anything for anyone else. But it's sort of like that kind of like, I guess, that red pill moment where it's like, I can't go back to just doing anything mundane. And you could be doing your own craft as a poet. You could be the world's best poet and make money and be financially stable and whatnot. There's nothing. The universe wants you to be happy, and the universe wants everyone to be happy. But people at some point got separated from that and started talking about, an angry, wrathful God who made you for shits and giggles or whatever he did, because it was a very male God. He must have a penis. This non-physical entity must have a penis, because gender is determined by physicality, and this non-physical man has the biggest penis ever. And
I think that kind of goes with the chicken and the egg, like which one came first. And with Aries at the start of the chart, a lot of the alchemy at that time and the way that the masculine definitely over the last couple thousand years, which a lot of people call it patriarchy, of course. Is the idea that if you were to actually just like get to the answer using alchemy or using what we have, if Aries is the start and it's Mars and it's masculine, that it would be the chicken that came before the egg. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's funny.
Which is very weird, but but I think that other side of it would be, well, what's holding the chicken here, which would be the feminine, which would be the whole, when we look up at the darkness, because the dark rules the feminine and the masculine rules the light, which again, feminine take that always the wrong way, because it's like, look at what's the background to the stars.
When did that even happen? Right? When did darkness become
look
evil?
At the stars, like what's holding in the womb of holding these stars and holding this reality and holding this beautiful energy all together is the feminine. So really, God is both. And it's a beautiful connection between both. And without the night, I mean, this place
there could be no day.
There would be no day, but also at the same time, this place would be destroyed. Either way, if it was just night all the time, it was just day all the time.
Yeah.
And so there's this beautiful. There's just
it's like a dance.
There's nothing but beauty in all of it.
Yeah.
And I think with what I think you've helped so many people do with your astrology.